welcome to our interview. We have a special guest with us today. Her name is Nazanin, and we're really excited to talk with her about her insights on mental health. Just to introduce myself, my name is Katrina. I also go by Kat. I've been suffering with bipolar disorder for the last 14 years, or at least that's when I was diagnosed. And only recently I decided to advocate for mental health. I write poetry on my Instagram account about mental health, and I hope that my poetry will reach a wider audience and help others struggling with mental health issues. So I was fortunate enough to meet another Katrina, also goes by Kat, and if you'd like to introduce yourself as well.
Thank you, Kat. So my name is Katrina. I also go by Kat, and it's such a funny coincidence that we met each other online on Instagram in the mental health community. We're both advocates and reached out, and it's great doing this and starting this initiative. To introduce myself, I am currently a psychology major at UC Davis. Throughout my college career, I've always been interested in nutrition, and it's only recently that I started getting into mental health work. I would say my experience with going to therapy myself during college really opened up my eyes to further amplifying my self-discovery and my journey. And I feel that really sparked my passion with mental health as I exposed myself to different areas of learning and different fields of knowledge in college. I realized this is the kind of work I want to do, and to help people out with their internal struggles as well. So
everyone, my name is Nazanin. I am a college student, and I'm very excited to be here, so thank you so much for having me. My interests are psychology, self-development, and I guess the subcategories would be abnormal psychology, and I'm very interested in attachment theory.
Yeah, so let's get to the questions. What is your journey that got you passionate about mental health?
So my journey that ignited a passion in me comes from my personal experience with struggling with anxiety. That's something that I've struggled with since childhood. And also being able to dismantle cultural views on seeking mental health. I think that's something that's very, unfortunately, a taboo topic to talk about in terms of seeking mental health, asking for help. However, I have noticed a significant change in terms of perspectives changing on seeking out mental health by seeing a counselor or a therapist or a psychologist since the COVID pandemic. And I'm very excited to be here and hear other people's thoughts.
I suffer from anxiety too, so I can definitely relate. And there's definitely cultural barriers that goes on. Even now, it's just, you would hope that, we progress in time, but unfortunately that's not the case. But yeah, I can definitely relate. Our next question is, do you have any specific interests regarding the scope of mental health? And if so, what are they?
Yes. So my favorite aspect of, I'm really interested in psychology and self-development. My favorite aspect would be abnormal psychology. And if we talk about I guess theories in psychology would be attachment theory. So yeah, I'm very passionate about those.
That's wonderful to hear. Yeah, I remember we actually did a podcast about attachment theory a while ago on your Self-Tuned podcast. Everyone go check that out. Nazanin is a great host as well. So grateful, very grateful to have her on here. And so our next question is, so what are you currently doing, or what do you want to do to spread awareness on mental health? Any projects that you're currently doing?
Sure, that's a really good question. So I always encourage my friends and family members to seek out mental health. And I say that with an emphasis because coming from someone whose background sees seeking mental health as a negative action, and it's not encouraged and it's not endorsed, that is something that I always highly recommend for my friends and my family to seek out mental health, because there are times where someone comes to you and asks for advice, and I don't think that giving people advice is going to help them cure their depression or anxiety. So that's why I always emphasize for everyone to like seek out mental health support. And so I have the podcast Self-Tune. I haven't been able to work on it currently because of my college classes, but that's something that in the past that I've done to help spread mental health awareness.
Great, that's wonderful. I wouldn't even think to come up with a podcast and try and spread it that way. That's the perfect way to do it, I think, especially with your audience and your university. That's a great way to go about it. Um, Next question would be, what are some things that you wish people knew about mental health?
Interesting. I would say I think mental health affects everyone, um, whether that's depression, anxiety, or bipolar personality disorders, schizophrenia. I think mental health affects everyone in terms of like you might not be diagnosed with it or experience it, but someone in your family might have or is struggling with it. Um, and there's always support available. I think I remember when I was struggling, there were times where people would say that like you're not alone or you're not the only one experiencing this. And I always thought that was a very like cliche comment to make. But when you think about it, like no one is actually alone. Like what you're experiencing is probably what someone else is experiencing as well. So just to remind yourself, I think finding positive people that accept you unconditionally. Actually, Kat and I, we kind of talked about this, but like love coming from like a conditional perspective versus unconditional perspective. So try to strive for unconditional love. So there's always support available. That's what I'm trying to convey.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is very cliche to hear that you're not alone, but it's true because you are really not alone. A lot of people suffer from the same things and have probably experienced the same things that you have. So that's a really good point to make because I mean, personally, I've always been like, well, you know, I'd rather hear something more supportive than you're not alone, maybe something more insightful, but obviously they're trying to help. They have the best interest, the best interest in you. So, you know, you got to think from their perspective. So, yeah, that's a really good point to make.
Yeah, I think that was really insightful. I think a lot of people forget that we are struggling with many similar things. And I feel like a big thing to know is that the generations are changing and that these things that used to be kind of seen as more taboo is now becoming more comfortable to talk about. I have hope for the future that it's going to become more normalized to talk about mental health and our struggles because really people won't know what's going on inside our heads unless we actually express it and we open up to people. And I think that's really like the root of what will kind of be the source of comfort for everyone is just when people are able to trust each other and be strong enough to become vulnerable with getting the support and help they need because they know it's out there. Just for everyone who's listening, everyone out there, like the first step is the hardest step, but that's all it takes to like actually for like a better recovery for anything that you're struggling with. So I think that's really important to know about, and that's a great like yeah, very very insightful that mental health is not just for crazy people or for sick people. It's anyone can get it, no matter how smart they are, no matter how like successful they are in life. It's a very universal thing, and it's what we should remember to keep our humanity, I think. So
Katrina, I really like
yeah,
how you said the first step is like seeking out mental health, and I definitely
it's the
agree with
hardest
that.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, because for example, like I remember I'm looking back, but like calling a therapist and
Hmm.
saying, "Hi, my name is XYZ, and I'm looking to get help on XYZ," and it's such a scary, vulnerable act because one, they might not answer. So not only do you feel rejected, or that okay, so I am alone. So I definitely agree with you in terms of the first step. But I do want to address. I think it's really important to kind of also understand that you can't ever like change someone. So that person has to also change. So that's where like self-awareness comes in. So first step is like self-awareness. If something is wrong, maybe I should seek out help. And then from there, seek out mental health. And that's such a scary act to do, like to be vulnerable, to say, like, I'm calling a therapist or a psychologist or XYZ. But overcoming that barrier, I think there's always, when you overcome it and, you know, when you're experiencing that work, whether that's like therapy or group support, support is always available.
Yeah, and I love that message because it really is. And people are scared, but you know, awareness is your power. Like once you realize like you need help, that you're strong for realizing that, you know, because everyone feels that way at one point or the other in their lives. So um awesome. So the next question is there anything that you currently do that helps your mental health, such as self-care routines or habits or practices or anything of the sort?
I would say I really enjoy journaling, writing down my thoughts. And I think why that could be, I was actually kind of trying to understand, like doing some psychoanalysis on myself, where I was trying to understand where that's coming from. And I think it's because I crave connection a lot. And so I think journaling and writing down my thoughts is a form of like connecting to myself. And so that's something that I really enjoy doing, like writing out my thoughts. Like today, July 29th or March 27th, 5:16 p.m., I did this XYZ. So that's something that I take engage in terms of connecting with oneself and it's kind of like a form of self-care, but also connecting to oneself.
I love that I'd like to add with journaling too is um, I can also second that I love journaling for my mental health, and definitely I've shown it has improved my mental health very much, because when I have these negative thoughts, I need to put it somewhere else. Like I feel like putting it into pen onto paper makes me feel like, you know, I am not my thoughts, and my thoughts are, you know, external, like on this paper. So then, you know how like there's some people who write down all these negative thoughts and then they crumple it, or like they burn it, or they throw it in the trash. Like those exercises, even though they seem small, they benefit very well.
I have a question. When you journal, do you come up with prompts or do you just kind of do free writing? Is there any advice that you give to people that are trying to or thinking about starting to journal?
Sure, good question. So I personally just like to free write, where if something comes up like today, I'm feeling sad. And then I just kind of write down my thoughts. Also helps a lot when I'm able to do that, because then I'm just able to like, I don't know how to explain it, but like flood all my thoughts on something versus like internalizing it, where I'm able to like put it on paper, and knowing that like closing my journal book is like a closure in some sense. And I really like how, Katrina, you had said that some people like to either like crumple the journal pages because it helps. It's like a symbol of like letting that go. And so I think for me, that symbol is like closing um, my journal book is a form of closure to what I'm experiencing.
That's a great point. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've also started journaling last fall, and I've started with quotes actually. So it's a little different from you versus, you know, free writing. So I would come up with motivational quotes and force myself to think about positive thoughts. And so there's just so many different ways that you can journal, and it's really amazing how well it works, really. Yeah, and that physical aspect of it, of closing the book, yeah, it really is like closure and putting it
Yeah.
away. And so
Yeah, I love that thought process. It's a great way of thinking about it. I guess this can be a question for both of you. Have you ever heard of like words of affirmation, like affirmation, affirmative quotes, or like words of affirmation? I think those are really helpful for me personally. Um, you know, like there's this a psychological concept is like what, like the things that you tell yourself in your brain you start to believe, so repetition is very powerful. And whenever I write like positive quotes, that I will remember to keep me on track with my mental health. Does that, do you guys ever do that? Yeah.
yeah, definitely. Yes, the affirmations and those motivational quotes. it's a big part of my life right now, I would say, because I've been in a bad place last fall, and having to dig myself out of that hole required me to go through those affirmations, and also, repeatedly tell myself, yes, I'm worthy. Yes, I'm loved. And even just reading motivational quotes like that, and, you know, different insights from other people have helped me. So, yeah, I don't know, Nazanin, if there's anything else that you'd like to add with that too.
Sure. I also really like affirmations. I think persistence and consistency is the hardest aspect, but being able to remind yourself that I am loved, I am worthy. Actually, I follow a psychologist, a holistic psychologist on Instagram known as Dr. Nicole Peria, and she had posted how you should. She had recommended for people to like write down why you're lovable, and then you're able to kind of review it, I guess study it. And I think that's where like consistency and persistence comes in, because the more that you are absorbing the information, the more it becomes true to you.
Definitely, definitely. And I guess our last question is, what is the best advice that you have for anyone who's currently struggling with mental health?
Good question. I would say I always say this, but and I say this with the emphasis because it's true. So when you think about it, I think um, when you're struggling with mental health, it's very difficult to see. Um, it's difficult to see. Um, I don't know how to explain this, but what I'm trying to convey is that each and every single one of us are leaders in some shape or form. Your presence being here has either impacted in the past someone else's, whether that was a small gesture of thoughtful act you did for them, or your presence provides them a sense of comfort or safety, that each and every single one of us are leaders and we're making change. And Katrina, we talked about this on the 12 podcast, but again, when you make change, it doesn't have to be on a macro level. It can be on a micro level. So Kat, for example, and Katrina, both of you leading this podcast, and for someone else who's listening to it, both of you are making change because you're bringing awareness to mental health and shedding light that even if you struggle with mental health, it's not the end of the world, or there's still support, like there's support available. And I think when I say support, I also want to also include that therapy is expensive. Seeking mental health is expensive, but there's always affordable, either zero or at low cost. I don't know how, if it's zero or low cost, but I'm trying to say that there is reduced payments that also Katrina, do you have more information on this? I don't know how to explain it, but like reduced payments,
Yeah,
reduced co-pays. Yeah, reduced co-pays. That's what I'm trying to imply.
reduce copays. Yeah, I don't know exactly like specifically the financial aspect of like in depth about like therapy, but I do believe like therapy and mental health services should be accessible for every student if they're low income, come from they don't have the highest socioeconomic status out there. It should be a universal resource, just like how physical health, when you break your arm, you're obviously going to go to the hospital. Like that's available for everyone. That's how it should be, I think, with therapy. um but yeah, like I think it's important for everyone to know out there that there are services available, even like free, like there's hotline, um that's so important. And actually it brings up another question, if you don't mind me asking, is how do you, like, I just want to hear it from your perspective, Nazanin. How do you deal with like the cultural barrier of kind of mental health being not really encouraged in your culture? Like, how do you deal with that? And do you have any advice for anyone out there who is also dealing with that?
I think for me, it's been having the exposure to psychologists, therapists on social media, and them shedding light on mental health. I think um, that's what really helped me to see a different perspective on mental health. because when I was younger and when I had asked to see a therapist, it was very much like, no, that's not for normal people, that's for crazy people. And I always had that difficulty to kind of understand that mental health, what mental health was and what services they would provide. And so having that exposure on social media, that psychology and therapy, um, it's normal and it's good if you go to therapy. In fact, it's not a bad thing. It's good, like really, really good. Um, so yeah, just having that exposure on social media and being able to know that I'm my own person. Sure, there is a cultural barrier and language barrier, but to also affirm to myself that I'm myself and that I'm accountable for myself.
Yeah, I totally relate, actually. Yeah, because even with me, like, um, I come from a family who does not encourage therapy. So when I did go to therapy and they saw how much healthier I was emotionally, they were like, "Oh, so it does work," which is funny to witness. But now they do support it, and it's great to see the change. Like in me, just voluntarily seeking help. They're more open to it. So this is what you mean, like with the micro changes. I think it's good for everyone that even the smallest of actions can it's like the ripple effect.
Yeah, or actually, kind of to add on, for example, if you come from an abusive household and you seek out mental health support, that action is a micro level, but in the long term, in 100 years, you're actually making a macro level. Because if you come from an abusive household, maybe you struggle with insecure attachment, whether that's dismissive, avoidant, or anxious attachment, um, that itself has its own set of, I guess, I don't know how to say this, but like that itself has its own struggles. And so going to therapy and being able to talk through that, to talk through your fear of abandonment or fear of commitment, you're making macro level change, because then your children are not going to experience the same generational trauma as before.
Generational trauma, that's a whole another topic we can discuss for hours. But definitely, yeah.
I guess we'll end with any other comments that you'd like to add.
I would say, let's see. I think it's important to recognize that seeking mental health is not a weakness. In fact, um, it's the best thing you can do for yourself. I also want to emphasize that, like any other professional, if you go see a therapist and you don't connect with them, or they are incompetent, that's also okay, because there's always competent therapists and mental health professionals. So what I'm trying to convey is that if you ever had a negative experience with a therapist who either lies or gaslights or I guess makes you feel bad, it doesn't mean that all therapists are like that. And so that's always that I remind, just in case, because when you say to go see a mental health professional, maybe if someone didn't have that good experience that first time, that they're kind of against it. So I always make sure to say that, like any other fields, there's always going to be competent and not incompetent individuals. So it's good to go into a new experience with new eyes.
Thank you again, Nazanin, for meeting with us and sharing your insights. It's wonderful speaking with you. And we look forward to your podcast as well. So feel free to check it out. We'll leave the link below. And once again, thank you again so much for meeting with us and discussing your thoughts.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I valued both of your thoughts as well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.